Story 1. I had a classmate when I was about 10 who was telling me about the summer he, his parents, and his brother spent in Switzerland. Then, out of nowhere, he asked me, "What is your favorite part of Switzerland?" When I told him I had never been before, he seemed genuinely baffled and did not believe me at first. Then he asked, "Why?" I said, "Well, we probably cannot afford it." And the look on his face told me that such a concept had never occurred to him. Story 2. When discussing finances and they say we do okay, they typically do better than you would expect. Story 3. I was in a group setting for new parents, and one of them said, and I quote, "We took our baby out on the small boat. Very nice people who own both a small and a large boat." Story 4. I gave this customer extra sauces at my job, and he slipped me a $20 bill. Story 5. Any activity that takes place at the club or any reference to the yacht club. In real life, my childhood bedroom window looked out at the yachts docked at one of the neighborhood yacht clubs. Story 6. Yeah, we have a small place on the water. You do not have to be wealthy to own lakeside or riverfront property. But this comment is best understood when heard in person. It is the way they say it. Little is not an accurate description, by the way. Story 7. Student job at university. Some wealthy students said, "Why do you even work for fun? Just ask your parents to give you more money." Story 8. Referring to your Ivy League education only by its city name. Yes, I went to New Haven for my undergraduate degree, and then Boston for my medical degree. Story 9. I crossed a line by sending groceries to one of my wife's friends after she gave birth to their first child. They are a younger couple, and I didn't think too much about it, just that shopping is essential but a hassle. My wife got a call from the new mother crying about how much we spent on them, how they could never repay it, and how her husband was embarrassed. So, I guess affording a cart of groceries without checking the total is on the list. Story 10. When they say, "We're not that rich, we're actually millions of dollars in debt." I will never be millions of dollars in debt. I am not rich enough for that. Story 11. Preface. I am not rich but have saved enough to feel safe in case of emergencies. A coworker asked me if I noticed that my deductions were wrong on a paycheck because his were off by about $20. I replied that I did not know it was a pay week. Apparently, that was enough for him to assume I was wealthy. Story 12. My attorney, landscaper, housekeeper, nanny, personal chef, and so on. Story 13. My grandmother would have someone come once a year or so to redo her living room with new slipcovers, drapes, and coordinated decorations. For Christmas, she would have someone come to do the tree and decorations. She was not incapable of doing it herself. I think it was just a convenience. Before anyone asks, I did not do it because I lived over 1,000 miles away most of my life. Anyway, I thought that was fancy. Story 14. Everyone should have one tuxedo. A coworker said that. He was around 25 at the time, I think. When we expressed our disbelief, he pushed back. What if you have to go to a black tie wedding? His immediate family was not rich, but his extended family was. He clearly did not realize how rare black tie weddings actually are for people who do not have millionaires in the family. An update because replies keep asking. A black tie event is one where men should be wearing tuxedos. I thought it was obvious from this comment's context because it is literally talking about tuxedos, but apparently not. Another update. I am not saying that only rich people need tuxedos. It is the everyone should part that is the key. Some men need one, but not every man does. Story 15. My sister-in-law, when she was married to a pretty rich man who has substantial savings and earns $450,000 a year, though he does not work much, she would say, "Just do in vitro fertilization," when I described my fertility struggles. "Oh, you got a Tesla?" When my husband mentioned he was shopping for a new car and about to make a purchase. Whole Foods is the only worthy grocery store. I'll just hire someone to help so I am not delirious when she had a young child who would not sleep well overnight. I buy all my clothing at boutiques to support local stores because I hate Target, Walmart, and Amazon. Nice in theory, but I would go broke quickly. I only buy my meat at local butcher shops, which are very expensive where I live. Montessori schools are the only schools we consider a type of upscale preschool. Her 6-year-old, when staying the week with my husband and me, kept asking, "What is work?" She literally did not understand that most kids' parents actually have to work and that we could not stay home to play with her all day. Story 16. Referring to another very wealthy person as salt of the earth. Story 17. The word just. Just do this. Just buy that. Just pay for that. When giving advice, the answer is simple to them because about 80% of the time money can solve problems or make them easier. The answer is obvious to them because they have the money to say it. Story 18. Tone-deaf advice. You should just try my housekeeper. You should just move. You should really have a dress in your closet for special occasions. You really could be doing a different job. Just switch. You should just go back and get your Doctor of Philosophy degree for fun. You should really see Spain. You really should. I can't afford any of that. But if I say so, they just go silent. Story 19. Many people talk about personal finance, but when I speak with wealthy individuals, I realize that tax policy determines 70% of how to save when your income exceeds what a 401k plan and individual retirement account can handle. Story 20. All the answers here are unsatisfactory. It is about what they do not say. Wealthy people do not talk about rent, debt, or mortgage. They mention getting their car fixed casually, especially expensive repairs. Story 21. When they casually say, "I've got it," in regards to a check when you are out to eat with a group. Anyone who can casually cover a restaurant tab these days is doing well. Story 22. They have no opinion on which gasoline station has the best price this week. Story 23. It's not the price of the private jet that gets you. It's what you have to pay to fly it everywhere. Story 24. Refer to the help when talking about chores around the house or yard. Story 25. When my coworker returned from a last-minute trip to Paris with her mom, which she initially complained was making her miss work, I asked her how it was. She just said, "Pretty fun." That was it. She never spoke of it again. I know for a fact she had a good trip. That made me flinch, considering I went on a vacation one time the year prior and couldn't stop talking about it for months. Again, when I asked what her parents do for work, she said her dad does construction or something, and her mom does something with 401ks. Her dad is a commercial real estate developer in downtown Seattle, and her mom manages 401k accounts for major firms and works with hedge funds. Another time, she said she was going to visit her grandparents in Hawaii and mentioned her grandparents worked on a farm. Now, they own one of the largest coffee plantations in the state and live in an impressive house. Another time, she said her aunt and uncle were moving to Alaska. They were going to visit, but would have to fly on one of those little planes that are small and scary. She didn't understand why they were moving to a deserted island in Alaska and thought she would be bored, because it would be like camping. They literally bought an island off the Alaskan coast. Her sister's boyfriend was going to fly them on his private plane to check out the island before they build their $10 million plus house on it, in a style like the movie The Proposal. Another time, she really wanted a plain red sweatshirt to wear during the Super Bowl. She complained that she couldn't find one anywhere, so she had to buy the $200 one from Nordstrom. I searched for the exact sweatshirt and found an identical one on Amazon for $15. She said, "Oh, why didn't I think of searching for it?" She is truly one of the most clueless people I've ever met. Every day is a string of her endless blonde moments. And I say that as a blonde woman. Story 26. Weekend car, meaning they have a separate vehicle from the one they drive to work. Story 27. My groundskeeper's car keeps leaving an oil stain in my driveway. Story 28. We had a client bring in a vehicle and showed us where it said it was number 23 of 360 made, which were made-up numbers. He was upset because when he bought it, they told him only 100 of them would be made. He shook his head and said, "There are a lot of rich people. You would not know he was that rich just by looking at him." He also once showed up to a family birthday party in April on a private jet because his brother was attending, and he wanted to show him that he had more money. The whole family, including the brother, is incredibly wealthy and thought it was funny. Story 29. Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was broke, I couldn't picture this. Story 30. I dated a man who had wealthy parents. They had an imported BMW from Europe and casually talked about how they missed their hobbies from their youth, like race car driving, which they self-funded because she was not good enough to get sponsored. He took me on my first skiing trip and paid for my rental, lessons, and week-long lift pass. He also bought me snow pants, a jacket, and gloves. I thanked them profusely for the Christmas present. They looked at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head, and said, "Oh no, dear, that is not your present. This is just because it is like you are already part of the family." They gave me a $100 gift card to a favorite clothing store and a bottle of fancy wine from a friend's winery for Christmas. I think fondly of them. Story 31. I was at the grocery store today and got everything my family needed. Story 32. Every failure is an opportunity. For example, my cardboard box boutique failed, but it gives me more time to work on my other passions. Story 33. I told my wealthy friend I liked his media stand. He said, "Thanks, Macy's, can you believe it?" With the same energy as I would have shown for a thrift store find. Story 34. Referencing going golfing during the workweek frequently enough, you start to put it together. I know all golfers are not rich, but I swear I talk to people who seem to have 3 days a week set aside just for golf. Story 35. I noticed this in myself when I started having a much higher income. My friend saw me walking out of the grocery store with groceries I bought for the entire week and asked, "Hey, how much do you pay for your food weekly or monthly?" I replied, "I don't know, I just picked what I needed." That also includes not really paying attention to the price at the counter and just using my phone to pay. I noticed this a lot because I used to be very poor and would check prices. Now I just walk in, buy what I need, and walk out. Story 36. When they mention that they have a meeting with their attorney, banker, or financial planner, but it is at their house, there is a level of wealth where those people come to you because your time is that valuable. Story 37. We have been fortunate not to have to worry financially. This statement is vague enough to leave much open to interpretation, yet clear that they are not struggling. Story 38. Based on commercials in the 1990s. Pardon me? Would you have any Grey Poupon? Story 39. My ex-girlfriend's brother once said, "Why would anybody buy something if it was not the best?" I thought he was joking, but he truly did not know why they produced cheaper versions of things. Story 40. Money isn't everything. People often say when asked for advice on well-paying jobs, or when something valuable breaks, for example, money may not be everything, but it is a huge factor unless you have plenty of it. Failing to realize that is a clear sign. Story 41. My pilot also likes this restaurant. I had no response. Story 42. Something I personally witnessed. Let's try this and this and this. Then order 5 or 6 dishes from an expensive menu to taste a bit of each one, and then discard the rest. Story 43. I once heard a man on the phone say, "Yes, I just took my boat to my beach house." Story 44. Refer to clothing as a piece instead of using terms like jacket, shirt, or pants. Story 45. When people are genuinely shocked and confused when I tell them I have never been to a Disney park. They may not be wealthy, but the looks of pity make me irrationally angry. Story 46. Last time we went to a place I had never been to before. A different country, a different continent, a very expensive restaurant, or a concert. Story 47. If you meet someone truly wealthy, you probably would not know. You are wealthy because you save money and do not flaunt it. You do not wear brand labels because everything you own is custom made. Story 48. From my experience as a certified public accountant working with some wealthy individuals, they are on a first-name basis with either their attorney or their banker. Not them referring to the attorney or banker by their first name, but the attorney or banker referring to them by their first name. Alternatively, whenever we were directed to a banker to get documents that indicated the client had significant cash. Also, having a hospital wing or school named after you usually means you made a large donation. And of course, if you are ever on the board of directors for a major corporation or a large nonprofit organization, that generally means you have considerable cash and connections. Story 49. You ask about their situation and they only say, "I am comfortable." It means comfortable spending a lot of money. Story 50. Our house, one of many, is on the eastern seaboard. Story 51. I have the same inexpensive Casio watch. I use it when I go sailing. Story 52. Honest to God, Allah, and Ifrit, I know multiple millionaires, and the only thing they have in common is that they don't spend money. They borrow against what they have, invest that, and live off the returns as best they can. It's not as elegant as it seems. It takes discipline and a plan. I'd rather work hard, spend to exist contentedly, and die broke. So the phrase, "Did you pack a lunch?" I'm seriously not joking. Western Pennsylvania. Story 53. My wife and I are going on a vacation without the children. Even now, in my more than 40 years on this earth, the only couples with children I have known who take more than an overnight date night have typically been very well off. Story 54. Stayed at my uncle's house the other week, and he mentioned they open the skylights at night to cool the house. It makes sense, but I've never seen skylights in a house that open before. Story 55. I will pay the bill at the restaurant or bar when it is approximately $50 or more to treat everyone. Story 56. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with a very famous and wealthy person whom I will not name. I mentioned an issue I had with my taxes in passing, and he said, "Oh, do not even talk to me about taxes." Story 57. I don't know if this expression is because they are wealthy or if it is what made them wealthy, but it is common. Variations include, anything is possible. You can achieve anything. Of course, you can do anything. Wealthy people are not limited by their beliefs. Story 58. In this thread, people think having the ability to not live paycheck to paycheck and have an emergency fund is rich. That is the middle class. Story 59. Often, people use the possessive my about jobs or services that most of us do not have one for. It does not mean that they own the person or that they are their only client, but it does hint at a service relationship, something a bit more personal and exclusive than just booking a one-off service or going into a shop. For example, the bank manager said, versus my banker said, or I went to a game butcher, versus I went to my game butcher, and I handed it over to the mechanic versus I handed it over to my mechanic. I got a suit from my tailor suggests that this person habitually goes to the same tailor, maybe getting a few new suits made bespoke every year, and that their lifestyle is such that it is worth having that long professional relationship. In comparison, I got a suit from a tailor just suggests buying a suit, perhaps even indicating that this person usually would not buy a suit from a tailor but would get a ready-made one from a department store. This distinction does not work for all professions, but for a surprisingly large number, it does. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.